Welcome to the Just Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Isabella, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a space where we come together to embrace the real, raw, and beautiful journey of motherhood. Here, we'll navigate the challenges of motherhood together, while I offer you support and encouragement to help you show up as your best self and to thrive in your role as a mom. Whether you're currently pregnant, adjusting to postpartum life, or you're a seasoned mom, you have found a community that gets it. So grab a cozy spot, maybe a cup of coffee, and let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome to episode 3 of the Just Motherhood Podcast. I have been loving this new little venture of mine in recording these podcasts. It honestly brings so much joy to my day just thinking about content that I want to share, as well as actually making it, putting it out into the world, and then getting feedback. There is nothing like it than knowing I'm actually making some kind of positive impact into other people's lives. And I want to read y'all the very first 5-star review that I ever got. It got posted almost a week ago, or it's actually going to be a week by the time this podcast episode airs, but it is on Apple Podcast. If you find value from this episode or any of my previous episodes, if you would consider also writing a review, it would mean the world to me. It not only helps let people know what I share and what you think about it, but it ultimately ends up boosting this podcast and helping me to reach other mamas. So this specific review says, "You have a great voice to listen to, your thoughts flow, and I love your storytelling. So natural and moving. Just this week, I was reading about how important community is to PPD. What a gift I believe you will be to many moms." And that was just the sweetest little message. When I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, I felt like my heart was melting that somebody thought that highly of me. And that obviously was based off my very first podcast episode that I posted, where I briefly talked about my struggle with PPD, and we'll definitely get into that in future episodes. But just that kindness of just leaving a podcast review means so much to me. And I even screenshotted it and sent it to my husband. I was like, I got my first review, and he sent me back the little emoji, they're kind of smiling and their eyes are teary-eyed and everything. But it truly it means the world to me to even get a single review. But if you would consider leaving a review, or if writing a review is not your thing, just click however many stars you feel like I deserve. That also helps me as well as following along or subscribing to the podcast definitely helps. But we are going to jump into the content today. This is technically a part 2 or a follow-up to last week's episode that came out. So you don't necessarily have to listen to them in order. You can definitely jump in and continue listening to this podcast episode. But basically last week I sat down and shared with y'all the 5 different types of self-care. And those are physical, emotional, social, spiritual, and professional, which professional does count if you are a stay-at-home mom as well. We kind of talked about what that looks like as a stay-at-home mom, but I basically just shared what are those 5 areas of self-care, why self-care is important for us as moms in the first place, and then I gave y'all some activities or different ideas for self-care in that area. And if you want the assessment to kind of gauge yourself, figure out how you can improve and what you can do better on in those areas, I offer that resource as well. So just make sure you email me. My email is going to be in the show notes. But that was basically last week's episode. And I gave all these amazing tips and activity ideas, but I know that you can sit there and you can listen to things and you can think, okay, that's super great. That sounds helpful. If I could do everything on that list, my life would probably be 10 times better. But how do I do that? How do I fit that into my schedule? I'm a busy mom. I have X amount of kids. I have all these obligations. There's no time for self-care. And that is the whole goal of this specific episode. I'm going to share with y'all how you can take practical steps to add self-care into your everyday or your weekly routines, and then just how you can allot that time into your schedule. I think it's so important for us to be intentional with self-care, because it can be something that we almost kind of sweep under the rug of oh, I'll get to it when I get to it. Or maybe we just do the bare minimum of self-care. For me, I'm even if I have a sucky day, I am going to wash my face at least once. I normally wash it twice a day, but if I feel terrible. I may not take my morning shower, but I'm like, I am washing my face or taking a shower before bed. Like, I have to do the bare minimum of self-care. And I feel like a lot of us do a bare minimum, but sometimes we can get stuck in a season where like we only do the bare minimum, and it's not enough for us to feel filled up. It's not enough for us to feel recharged and like we have enough to give to our kids and to our families. And I think that so many times, like, I've seen these posts on like TikTok or Instagram where it's like, everybody says you can't pour from an empty cup. But you know, in motherhood, sometimes like you don't have another choice, or as a mom, you can and you will, or whatever. And it's meant to be real encouraging. And I do think there is some truth to that. Like, you can't pour from an empty cup, but as moms, we somehow find the strength to do it. I honestly think it's God's grace. Like, God calls us to this role of motherhood. Like, motherhood is not an accident, and He gives us the grace for this season, but we can't depend on His grace alone. Like, it's not sustainable. It may get us through the newborn stage when we're like in pure survival mode and have no idea what the heck's going on because we've never like touched a baby that's 24 hours old before, but it's not going to sustain us now when our kids are 5 or they're in toddlerhood and we're having more kids now, and it's not healthy for us to just think like we can just keep running on fumes. And truly, yes, you can't pour on an empty cup. Like, that is truth, because the goal of self-care is to refuel yourself, so now you have something to give. But when you're on empty, you're giving away parts of yourself that weren't meant to be given away, which means now you don't have anything left for yourself, and that's where it becomes unhealthy. And I also feel like it's so important for us to remember that Jesus Himself says that we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. And neighbors means the people around us, but I think neighbors also mean like who's in our circle, and that's our kids, that's our family. And if Jesus says we have to love them as ourselves, how are we loving ourselves? And I don't mean in a way that's vain or narcissistic or selfish, but in a way that is love in action. Like, how are we taking care of ourselves? Because how we love ourselves shows up in how we love others. And it's so important for us to build in these habits, build in these routines to have self-care so that we can love our family and our children well and show up as our best selves in motherhood and in all of our responsibilities and commitments to our families. So I think it's so important that we add in this into our routine. So not just like thinking about hypothetically like, oh, on Friday, I guess I'll go for a run. Like, no, schedule it. Like, sit down, find the time, and let's do it. So I'm going to share with y'all just some practical tips that you can start doing to add self-care to your routine. Honestly, a lot of these come from like my personal experience, how I've added in self-care in different seasons of my life. And just as a disclaimer, I'm only a little bit over a year into motherhood, so I don't know what it's like to have more than one child. I don't know what it's like to be a stay-at-home mom to 3 kids, or to have a 5-year-old, or to have middle schoolers. Like, I know every season looks so differently, so I tried to kind of break these down to like the basics and not as specific to age range, but I know that you probably have a totally different perspective, and that everybody's season and everybody's motherhood journey is so different. So what works for me may not be a best fit for you, but I hope that you're able to take some of these ideas that I give you and sit down, look at your days, look at your weeks, and think, okay, how can I take this practical tool and apply it to my life? How can I take Isabella's schedule and some of the tips she gave me and figure out a time in my schedule that works best for that? So the very first tip that I want to give, this goes to nursing moms, or if you're pumping, even if you're just like feeding your baby a bottle. Like, if you are still directly responsible for feeding your baby, they're not just sitting in a high chair and like eating their food or doing whatever. Like, if you are feeding your baby, you're probably sitting there on your phone. Like, you're probably scrolling, or the TV's on, or whatever that looks like. And I just encourage you, like, turn it off. Turn off the TV, turn off your phone, and use that moment for self-care. I know that nursing, it can take a long time. Like sometimes you're nursing for 20 minutes to maybe an hour. And it's this constant time where you're just absorbed probably in social media, and now you're just scrolling. And that is such a wonderful time where you can think back on some of the activities that I talked about last week. I really think that emotional or social self-care could really be done during that time. It could be texting old friends, even calling them, FaceTiming them, like whatever you feel comfortable with. Like call your friends and family, stay connected, stay in touch. Use that time to look for like mommy and me classes or mommy and me groups. If your library has anything, like trying to find things that could offer you a sense of community and motherhood. For emotional self-care, just finding that time to invest in yourself. Maybe you keep your phone on, but you're listening to a podcast that is refreshing to you. Maybe this podcast. Maybe you're sitting there, listen to worship music. Maybe you just sit in silence and just think and let your thoughts just exist in your brain without feeling like you have to suppress them with social media or whatever else. Like just sit there and think, take in your baby, take in their features and their little hands. And I know the nursing or pumping and feeding sessions can feel so long. And sometimes you're like, I just want it to be over. I have all these things to do. But I hope that if you're in that season, you could see it as a blessing, because one day you're not going to have to sit in that chair anymore or sit on the couch anymore and feed your baby. One day they're going to be self-sufficient, and it literally happens like in the blink of an eye. And you're just going to be sitting there instead, like hoping they don't choke on the food that you cut up super tiny for them. Like you're not going to have the time to just like sit there and be absorbed in something else. Like whenever they're eating, when they're 2 or 3 years old, like you're going to be more focused on making sure they're actually eating and not throwing it everywhere. So take those moments of the quietness where your baby is just there, relaxed, they're getting fed, they're getting their bellies full, and focus on how you can feel yourself in those moments. The second tip that I want to share, which this honestly has been the biggest game changer for me, is wake up before your kids. And I'm not going to give you a set time because that will be dependent on your kids' sleep schedule, when they wake up, how often they wake up during the night, like how tired are you in the morning, but wake up before your kids. I started doing this in April, so it's about over 4 months of me doing this. I started waking up about 30 minutes or so before my son, and now I've gotten to the point where I'm waking up an hour before my son. And I do want to make a disclaimer, I don't do it perfectly every day. Like there are some days that I will literally lay in bed until 15 minutes before he wakes up, or I'm literally waking up when he wakes up. But I find I have my best days in productivity, in mood, in patience, and having grace, when I have mornings to myself. So I try to wake up about an hour before my son. He wakes up anywhere typically between like 7 to 7:30. 7:30 is kind of like the sweet spot I have found with him. But he'll wake up anytime around then. So I try to wake up by 6:30. And now that I'm thinking about it, honestly, I do really try to wake up at 6. So we are technically most days at an hour and a half, but I like to say an hour because sometimes he is waking up earlier. But I try to wake up and spend that time on you. Like think, if I had to do anything, how do I want to start my day? For me personally, I sit there and I read my Bible. I read a devotional. I spend some time in prayer. I have like instrumental worship music playing. Like it's just such a great mood setter. Maybe take a shower, get ready for the day. Like how we talked about, wear clothes that make you feel good about yourself. Like start dressing up if you're a stay-at-home mom, or obviously if you're working, you're probably getting ready in whatever your work attire is. But spend that time and make it all about you in the morning. Refuel your cup. Read a book that brings joy to you and makes you feel refreshed. Have a cup of coffee in silence. Like that is one of the most beautiful gifts. A warm cup of coffee, or cold if you like iced coffee like me, and you can just drink it and not hear anything else. But have that time in the morning to yourself. I find when I don't do that and I am waking up to my son needing me, I am stressed. I love my son, and I actually made a TikTok about this several weeks ago. I love my son so much. Love being a stay-at-home mom, but I hate waking up to my son needing me. like genuinely. And I hate mornings. So this is coming from somebody that before I ever had a baby, I would wake up at the very last minute that I needed to wake up to get ready for work, go to my full-time job, and then on the weekends, I literally was sleeping until like 9, 10, or later. Like, I hate mornings. I'm not a morning person, but I hate the anxiety and the pressure of like rolling out of bed and immediately tending to my kids. Like, it feels overwhelming to me because I don't have enough time to center myself and think about, okay, like, what do I even need to do today? And, where's my mood at? Are there things I'm struggling with? And when I have that hour to myself in the morning where I can just lay all my problems at the feet of Jesus and I can absorb his word, I can pray about whatever I'm dealing with, and then I can also just have free time to do whatever I want to do before my son wakes up and needs me. I'm like, once he wakes up, I'm like, yeah, my son's up, like, let's go, like, have a great day and eat and go on a walk and like all these things. But when I'm waking up to him, I don't want to do anything. I feel so lazy. I feel sluggish. I'm literally like living on fumes. So wake up before your kids. You have to determine what that looks like for you. And it may not be something that's doable in this season, but at least just like figure out how to have a slow morning together with your family. If you can't wake up before them, start just a couple minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, like work your way up. Like I said at the beginning, I would wake up 30 minutes before my son, but 10 minutes of that was spent laying in bed until I finally got my butt out of bed and would go into my living room. So work your way up, especially if you're not a morning person. And I promise you, even if you don't like it, because I don't like waking up early, you will feel so much better about it once your kid wakes up. And you are going to be so relieved and so thankful that you did it. Another tip that I have, this one's more for the stay-at-home moms, or if you work from home, is just blocking out 30 minutes of nap time for self-care. However you want to spend nap time is totally up to you. Like, I know so many moms are like, that's just like my time to rest. So I'm going to like grab a snack. I'm going to pop on a TV show and I'm going to sit on the couch. And that's great. If you're like me and you work part-time from home, I am working during my son's naps most of the time, but I am now trying to prioritize at least 30 minutes of my son's nap for self-care. We go on morning walks. And so by the time we come back and my son eats and we play a little bit, he'll go to bed, and that's when I like finally take my shower. I don't do it first thing in the morning since like it's so hot and humid here where I live in Alabama. So I'm like, I will take my shower like once he's sleeping. So I take my 30-minute shower, I get a good snack in, and I just have time to like focus on myself, and then I'll go into work mode. And for me, like having that dedicated time makes it feel so much better. So then when he is awake, I'm like, okay, I could be fully present. Like, I'm not worried about, oh, do I stink? Oh, I feel gross. Why am I still like wearing my walking clothes? Like, it feels good just to like have that 30 minutes. And the self-care could look like anything for you. If you want to exercise, if you want to cook yourself something nice for lunch, like go back and listen to last week's podcast episode. And if there's something that you want to do for that self-care time slot, do it. But at least one nap a day. Block 30 minutes and put your phone down, put away distractions, don't turn on that TV show, and do legitimate self-care. This next tip kind of is like a longer one, and I don't really know how to fully explain it, but basically self-care is not something that necessarily has to be done alone. Like, it doesn't mean that it's alone time. It doesn't mean that you have to go lock yourself in the room, be like, sorry kids, like mom's done for the night. Like, don't bother me, go to your dad or whatever. Like, self-care doesn't have to mean it's always alone. And I know that when we're moms, especially if you stay home and you have younger babies, like it's hard to always get time alone and you're on call like 24/7. So start involving your kids in that self-care. Like, think back to some of the things I shared in the previous episode and find how you can involve your kids and your family into those hobbies. Because really the goal of self-care is doing activities that make you feel refueled so that you can show up as your best self. And if that is doing exercise or physical activity, like throw on a YouTube dance video like Mad Fit or Grow with Joe or something and just start doing it, and they're probably just going to start dancing around the living room with you. Go on a walk with them. Like, that's something I do with my son every morning. I put in my AirPods, I'm listening to my own podcast, and we're on a walk, and obviously I keep it low enough so I can hear him, but he's just chilling. Like, he's taking in the scenery, but going on that morning walk is just so refreshing to me. Take them with you if you're going to meet up with a friend for coffee, like have her bring her kids, or do a play date where you can hang out with the moms and the kids can play. Like, that is self-care. And figure out ways that you can add your kids into those self-care routines. Because I feel like a lot of us are like, well, I don't have time for self-care. Like, I can't do that or whatever. But self-care does not mean alone time. Now, there are times that we need that. We need to be alone because there's certain things where we need to process on our own, or we don't want to get distracted, like when we're praying or whatever. But there are a lot of things that we can involve our kids in that can refuel us to some degree with them still being there. So just figure something out that could work for your family, and ultimately that's going to be up to you. Like, what can you involve your kids in? And you really have to determine, obviously based on your kids' personalities and how many kids you have, their age group. Like right now I'll work out in the living room with my son and he kind of just stares at me and then he goes back to playing because I think he's like, what are you doing, Mom? Like, you look crazy. And he kind of like starts laughing at me. But once he's like 2 or 3, like I'll put on a workout video and I'm sure he'll like start dancing with me and love it. So just figure out what that looks like for you and start with at least like 1 or 2 activities a week that you can add your kids to that you find refueling and refreshing. Make it fun for them, and then it'll be so much fun for everybody, and it won't feel like something like, oh, I have to do it and it's a huge hassle. But it's like, no, I get to do this with my family and it's so fun and we all look forward to it. Something else that I would recommend, this kind of, I should have like reordered these a little bit better now that I'm thinking about it, but talking about waking up before our kids means that we have to have a good night beforehand. So once your kids are in bed, I recommend that you have like an end time, like have a time every night where you are done, like clocked out basically, like no more mom stuff, no more house stuff, like I'm done. For me, it's whenever we put our son to bed, which we're in a really weird phase with naps right now. Like some days he does 1 nap a day, some days he's doing 2. Like I think we're about to drop that second nap. So his bedtime is not as structured as it used to be, but it's typically anywhere from like 7:30 to 8. I'm pretty much done. Like he's settled in bed, he's good for the night, and my husband and I will do the dishes together. If there's not a lot of dishes, we'll both just wait until the morning because we're like, there's like 5 dishes in the sink. We'll just deal with it later. But we do the dishes together and then we're both done. Like we are clocked out. He's not expecting anything to be done around the house anymore. I'm not expecting anything to be done around the house anymore. Like we are done. I'm not going to put up laundry. Like if I have a laundry basket in my room, I will push that in my closet. Like I'm doing that tomorrow. I'm clocked out. We're good. And so having like that set end time, like I'm done, feels so freeing to me, especially when you and your partner are both agreeing to it of like, hey, we're both done. We're both off parent duty. Like obviously, unless our son needs something, we're both off house duty. Like we both either will do something together or we'll go like our separate ways and have like our alone time for self-care. But it is so nice. And then that mom guilt is gone. Like hold yourself accountable. And it kind of feels weird at the beginning if you are somebody that goes until bedtime, but have a set end time. And then once you have your end time, you need to make sure that you prioritize your night with refueling yourself and participate in hobbies or activities that fill up that cup for you, that make you feel like you can show up as your best self for tomorrow. Because it's almost like we're kind of like setting ourselves up for success. And this does not mean you have to do it the entire night. This does not mean you have to do self-care and journaling and meditating and praying and blah, 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 like until you go to bed at like 10 o'clock at night or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying give yourself like 15 to 30 minutes and then go scroll on social media afterwards or go binge watch that TV show or whatever that looks like for you. Like, just set aside a little bit of time every night that is truly just dedicated to self-care, that feels refueling to you, that the things you want to do are getting done. Like if you want to play an instrument or if you were looking forward to coloring or reading, like do that 30 minutes. And then if it goes longer, it goes longer. It's kind of like what people say when you're in school and it's like you need to study for a test. Hey, just start studying 15 minutes. If you go longer than that, you go longer. Then you work your way up to 30. And then eventually you're like, oh, I can study for an hour and I didn't even realize I was. Like, you can work your way up to it, but just set aside like, nope, this is my time. I'm doing it, and then I can do whatever else I want to do. With that, I would also recommend have a nighttime routine. And this could be the time that you choose to do self-care. For me, I like to do a self-care activity that's more like a hobbies based or like interest based, and then I go into my nighttime routine. So like my nighttime self-care is different than like my hobby self-care. So you kind of, again, everything that I'm saying, you got to figure out what that looks like in your schedule. But this is one that I probably will say is like the most important. Have that nighttime routine. Do your skincare, brush your teeth, floss your teeth, wash your hair, take your shower, whatever. Like, do your self-care, because hygiene, taking care of your personal hygiene and your physical health, that is self-care. Like, do the things, use all those million products that you're probably buying off TikTok shop. Like, use everything, make yourself like all lathered up with all your lotions and everything, and then get in bed, get off your phone. Get off your phone. It is not loving to yourself to stay up late. And that is like a whole episode that I could do on itself of like why you should not be on your phone in bed. But I try to get off my phone because then it allows your brain to like think. When we are constantly on our phone, it's something, I'm not going to get all this right. My therapist was telling me about it. But it's something like with your amygdala does not process whatever it needs to process. So if you don't get good sleep at night, like if you're like, oh, I go to bed at like 10 and I need to wake up at 6, like it should be 8 hours of sleep. And that's something I told my therapist, like, I should be sleeping through the night. But she's like, well, you're not letting your brain any time to process. So like right when you hit the pillow is when you finally put off your phone. You are not going to give your brain the space it needs to like think. So you are going to be tossing and turning all night because your brain is going to be like, hey, we didn't think about this. Hey, we didn't do that. Like, have time to allow your brain to process. And screens don't allow our time. Don't allow our brain the time to process that. So get off your phone once you get in bed, and then journal. I'm a huge fan of journaling. Like, you don't have to sit there and be like, dear diary, today I did da da da. Like, I bullet point. And if you saw my journal, like, I use the worst handwriting in my journal, even though I feel like I have pretty decent handwriting. Like, it's chicken scratch. I'm like full on brain dumping. I'll be like, Elliot getting big, sad. Like, I'm just like, where really if I wanted to sit down and dear diary it, would be like, I'm so sad that Elliot is starting to get so big. Like, I just bullet point it. Or frustrated that trash didn't come today, like, or whatever. Like, it's just like so random, like bullet point. But try to focus on emotions, how you feel about things, anything big that came up during the day, whether it's has comfortable or uncomfortable emotions around it. Like, make it all about like your thoughts, feelings, and emotions instead of like a to-do list or I need to get that done or whatever. Like, do it on the things that your brain should be processing, and bullet point it or write it however you want to write it. Draw it. Like, sometimes I like to sketch how I feel or whatever. Like, just start writing things out. I don't put a time limit on it. I just go until I'm like, okay, feel like I'm like racking my brain of like what else to write. Like, if you're getting to that point, you've probably written everything. But just keep going until like your hand stops moving. Like, your brain will know like when it's done. And once you have to sit there and really start thinking, you're probably done. Now, if you don't journal often, you will probably sit there a lot at the beginning because you're not used to it. Like, it may be a new muscle for you to work on. But just sit there, and if you are very new to journaling, I recommend just 5 minutes. 5 minutes, just journal. And then once you feel like you're getting really good at it, figure out the flow that works for you. But once you're done journaling, this is now the time to do hobbies that are like unwinding to your brain. And that stuff like reading, you could color, do a crossword puzzle. I've been doing Sudoku. I don't know if it's Sudoku or Sudoku. I've always said Sudoku, but I like to do that sometimes before bed. And then pretty much at that point, if I'm feeling really tired, my new favorite thing is I got this like eye mask massager thing from TikTok shop, and I love that thing so much. It is like one of the most relaxing things I've ever used. This is not sponsored at all, but if you want the link, I'm more than happy to send you the link. But it has like a heat only mode, so it won't massage. It's just like super like warm, comforting heat, and I like put that on my face, and it's just like the mask over your eyes, like the shape of like a sleep mask or something, and I literally will like pass out. Like, I will fall asleep with that thing on my face. And it only stays on for 15 minutes. It shuts off by itself, so no worries with that. But I'm like literally like mouth wide open, like I'm knocked out. Like, it is so relaxing. But have that nighttime routine that helps you get good sleep, because sleep is a huge part of your physical self-care, and it is so good for us to get that sleep that we need. So those are kind of all my tips. To brush through them really quickly is, if you are nursing or feeding your baby, use that time for self-care. Make sure you block out time to wake up before your kids. You set what time that is for you, work up to it, and figure out what hobbies would be refueling to you during that time. Block out at least 30 minutes a day, specifically during nap time, for self-care. Don't do self-care alone. Include your kids and your family in it. Find hobbies that y'all can all do together that are refreshing to you and fun for them. Set an end time for your mom duties and your household obligations so that you cannot have the mom guilt and you are off the clock. Prioritize your night by having at least 15 to 30 minutes to refuel yourself and focus on fun self-care hobbies. And then have a nighttime routine that gets you set up for success, gets you all ready for bed, and allows you to have really amazing sleep. With all that said, I mean this in the most loving way, because I don't want to feel like I'm talking at you. Like, this is a conversation we're having together, but if anything, I am talking to the Isabella that I was like a year ago. There's no excuses for this. You need to get off your phone. Like, that was my biggest thing. Set those screen time limits. I even had my husband like set the screen time limits on my phone, and he knows the password. I don't even know it. Have somebody else set those limits on your phone. Set limits on your TV through the Wi-Fi. Like, stop just pushing aside self-care. Stop fueling that time with other things. Because so many people, especially moms, I feel like we say, oh, we don't have time. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. But we are so preoccupied with our screens or our to-do list. We're constantly doing stuff around the house, even when we should be resting. And we don't let ourselves get the self-care we need. And to me, not prioritizing self-care is the thing that is selfish. Like, please do it, because I know you can. You just have to prioritize it. So I want to pray for you real quick before we close this podcast episode today. Father God, thank you so much for my sweet friend sitting on the other side of this podcast. And I just hope that she feels so refueled by some of the stuff that I shared today. God, I just pray that she is able to take the time to find the self-care hobbies that help to refuel her and the activities that recharge her and make her feel rested so that she can show up as her best self. And God, I just pray that you open little pockets of time throughout her day so that she can invest in herself, so that she can truly be the best mom, the best wife, the best employee, the best friend that she can be, because she's focusing on and prioritizing her self-care in this season of motherhood. Amen. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Just Motherhood Podcast. I so thoroughly enjoyed our topic of self-care. I did want to say that I want to make sure that I prioritize your needs and your questions with my podcast. And I do have a lot of content planned, but if you have any questions or topic suggestions, please reach out to me and let me know what those are. You can email me at justisabellaj@gmail.com. That's just JUST Isabella, ISABELLA, and the letter J @gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful, please take a moment to leave a written review on Apple Podcasts so that we can help to reach other mamas who are in need of encouragement and guidance to show up as their best selves. And make sure that you also take a minute to subscribe or follow my podcast on Spotify or Apple so that you don't miss out on the future episodes. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and remember, you are loved, you are valued, and you are chosen. See you next week, Mama.